Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
I'll introduce Donald in a moment, but he's going to be talking on going into darkness. So at this point, we usually go around the room and say our name. And we thought that as well as saying your name, you could say 2 words that describe how you feel at this time of year. So my name is Bob, and my 2 words are cold and confused.
Larry, quiet.
Greg, cozy and embraced.
Scott, hopeless and depressed.
George, quiet and reserved.
Cass, quiet and Todd, bitter and hopeful.
Kay, music and food.
Nicholas, an ungreedy 94-year-old grandmother.
Jonas, cold and excited.
Long, nostalgic and frugal.
Jack, just fine.
Douglas, tired and sore.
Paul, open and frightened.
Don, inward and sleepy.
Paul, chilly and optimistic.
David, warm and cold.
Lee, quiet and sleepy.
Ollie, questioning.
Peter, cold and cranky.
Jim, caffeine deprived.
Bob, don't know. David,
Ron, expectant and hopeful.
Peter, anxious and depressed.
Marty, I'm grieving. I just lost my best friend in Alabama.
Steve, over it.
Kishore, excited and blessed.
Michael, introspective and creative.
Clint, cautious. Scott, reflective and
Donald, quiet, slower.
Okay, so Donald has been studying insight meditation since 1976, and he's active with the Buddhist Peace Fellowship and the Buddhist Alliance for Social Engagement. He's working on a book on individual practice and social change, and he's teaching and leads retreats. He has 2 groups in Berkeley, one in Indonesia and one in Spirit Rock.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, it really is a delight to be here and see so many familiar faces and to hear what's going on with you, as much as 2 words can convey, or 1 word. And so it's good to be here. And I wanted to speak about the theme of going into the dark, partly because of the season, and partly because of the political season. And so I'd like to reflect on some of the some of the qualities of this sense of going into the dark that are first qualities really of the natural world, but that we can really see in various ways, see the different qualities. So I'm going to talk about going into the dark first in terms of simply the quality of absence of light, relative absence of light at this time. I also want to talk about going into the dark in terms of going into our ignorance. It's another sense of going into the dark. I also want to talk about more very positive senses of the dark, talk about going into the dark as darkness as fertile, darkness as creative and productive. Also talk about going into the dark as going into the difficult. And lastly, explore going into the dark as going into the unknown and mysterious. And with each of these, I believe that there are ways that we can practice, that we can be inspired perhaps by this season as a way to support our practice, to work more fully with dimensions of practice, to say, oh, it's the time of going into the dark. Let me look at these aspects of what that means. And so the first aspect is this time of coming towards the solstice, the time of less light. Most cultures that have ever existed on the earth, when they come to a period of less light, they slow down. And they often have times for looking at what's most deep, what's most important. I know some of the indigenous cultures that I know the best, particularly of the northwest coast, Washington up to Alaska. This is a time of ceremonies where a lot of the preparation for the winter has been completed, and they go into ceremonies. And they really look to what's deep. They look to the natural world to see that it's a time of rest and really going deeper to bring forth what comes in the next season. Of course, in our culture, we don't do this. We actually go crazy. We don't slow down, we get faster. And it's almost as if we're interested ourselves in using this time as a time of reflection or going deeper, we have to do so quite consciously and probably resist many of the culture's pressures. I know that in my extended family, we agreed not to go shopping for gifts for each other, except for the children, but to really not join in the general craziness of the culture. And so this first aspect is really a sense of really going into the dark, in the sense of slowing down, of being more quiet. And I wanted to read something from the Northwest Coast cultures. One of my favorite books is called The Raven Steals the Light. This is actually how the world was created. The raven stole the light and brought it to the world. And so I thought I'd just read this passage which describes the state of darkness. And it sort of points towards that quality of darkness as fertile. Before there was anything, before the great flood had covered the earth and receded, before the animals walked the earth, or the trees covered the land, or the birds flew between the trees, even before the fish and the whales and the seals swam in the sea, an old man lived in a house on the bank of a river with his only child, a daughter. Whether they were both as beautiful as hemlock fronds against the spring sky at sunrise or as ugly as a sea slug doesn't really matter very much to this story, because it takes place in the dark. Because at that time the whole world was dark. Inky, pitchy, all-consuming dark, blacker than 1,000 stormy winter midnights, blacker than anything anywhere has ever been since. The reason for all this blackness had to do with the old man in the house by the river, who had a box which contained a box, which contained a box, which contained an infinite number of boxes, each nestled in a box slightly larger than itself, until finally there was a box so small, all it could contain was all the light in the universe. Enter the raven, the trickster figure in this culture. The raven, who of course existed at this time because he had always existed and always would, was somewhat less than satisfied with this state of affairs, since it led to an awful lot of blundering around and bumping into things, which he did not like. It slowed him down a good deal in his pursuit of food and other fleshly pleasures, and his constant effort to interfere and to control things and change them. And so, in that state of darkness, the raven decided to steal the light from the old man, and that's the rest of the book. But I wanted just to share with you this sense of the darkness, because it's that quality. A lot of the qualities are there, the darkness as having this tremendous creative power, but also being a time when you can get confused, you can knock into things, you can bumble around, you can get depressed and so forth. And it really points to this, I think, first to the second quality that I want to talk about, which is the darkness really as fertile, which is that for me, focusing on this theme of going into the dark makes me want to be more with the natural world, wants me to look at what's happening with the trees and the bushes and the earth, because it's really not that nothing is happening. It's more that things are slowing down, and in that darkness there's a great deal of creative activity happening. So I think that's very helpful for our practice to know that sometimes when nothing is happening or nothing seems to be happening, it can actually be fertile. In the same way that at night we go into our dreams, which are incredibly fertile and creative. And so I think I would encourage us, that when we think we're going into a time that's difficult or dark, it also has that qualities of being fertile. The Buddha himself, he awakened in the dark. If you remember the story of the awakening occurring in the different watches of the night. So this darkness is also something very, very fertile. It's something that can be very powerful and creative and beautiful. There's a beautiful line in one of Rilke's stories. I think many of you know Rilke is really a poet of the darkness that's fertile. He talks about how, I think I have some lines here from Rilke where he says, "I love the dark hours of my being. I am born from darkness." And he has this beautiful passage in the text called the Letters to a Young Poet that some of you know, where he talks about how we have to often follow the darkness to really bring out our creativity. He writes to the young poet. The young poet has asked him all these questions, which are trying to be clear before he can be clear. And Rilke asks him to stay with the darkness, to trust the fertility of not knowing, of being in the dark. He says, try to be patient towards all that is unresolved in your heart, and try to love the questions that you ask. Love them like locked rooms and like books that are written in a very foreign tongue. Do not now seek the answers which cannot be given you because you would not be able to live them. The point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live some distant day into the answer. It's that sense of being willing to be with the darkness, being willing to trust somewhat in the unfolding. There's also a sense of the darkness as related to ignorance. We often taught, in many spiritual traditions, it's talked about that we have, as it were, veils across our eyes that we can't see. And we could also think of this time of going into the dark as actually exploring where our darkness is, which is, I think it's this really unique quality that human beings have, where we're something like, part of us is in ignorance and part of us is knowing. And kind of do you know that, I think it's a kind of a late Middle Ages drawing which shows this human being with half the body in the ordinary world and half the body pushing into the celestial world, which is filled with stars and beautiful objects. People know that graphic? It's used in a lot of advertising, actually. And it's something that, to me, is very powerful, that we can actually know where we're ignorant. Which is, when you think about it, it's kind of interesting, right? We can actually know where we're ignorant and move to bring light and attention to where there's darkness, so to speak. We can know, okay, yeah, I can feel myself not knowing, I can know something about what I don't know. I can know my confusion. I can know where I need to go. We can know this in our bodies, in our minds, in our hearts. What I love about relating to our bodies is that there are places where we know that we don't have much consciousness in our bodies. Most of us, some parts of our back, right? We can kind of know where we're not aware. And we can reflect and say, let me move more into the place of my darkness. Let me see it more clearly. Let me open to my ignorance. And some of us may do this through activities which let us be maybe more spontaneous, or just work with almost let the unconscious manifest. I know I did this. I was able to do this more when several years ago I did a 6-month training with the Clown School of San Francisco. I think some of you may know this. I haven't brought my clown persona here before. My clown persona is named Garbanzo Bean. And maybe another time. I don't know if Garbanzo Bean is quite ready for today. But anyway, Garbanzo Bean was a way to jump off the cliff into the darkness, because it was like being a clown or doing expressive work is like just inviting some of the shadow material or the so-called dark material to come forth. And my clown teacher said that the only way that clown work has any power is if you're tapping into your shadow. You're tapping into the darkness in some way. And not always easy work, but I think that's sort of an invitation to us. We might think of our practice. How can I move more into the darkness? How can I move more into my ignorance? And I think I'm not going to resist the temptation to read a passage by one of our great philosophers about ignorance. And this is our current Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld. And some of you may know this famous passage, which came from the February 12th, 2002 Department of Defense news briefing. And it's since achieved near immortality. And here it is. This was, I think, an answer to questions about weapons in Iraq. And here's what he said. I apologize to anyone whom this offends, but not too much. We can talk about it later. As we know, there are known knowns. This is actually completely true and verbatim. As we know, there are known knowns. There are things we know we know. We also know that there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are some things we do not know. But there are also unknown unknowns. The ones we don't know, we don't know. And later in the... And if you read the transcript of the news briefing, the reporters kind of play around and say, well, in relation to these facts about Iraq, is that an unknown unknown? And Rumsfeld says, I'm not going to answer that. And he goes on to say, I could also have said that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, or vice versa. Question. But we just want to know, are you aware of any evidence? Because that would increase our level of belief from faith to something that would be based on evidence. Rumsfeld. Yeah, I'm aware of a lot of evidence involving Iraq on a lot of subjects. It's not for me to make public judgments about my assessment or other assessments of that evidence. That's the last question. Now, you'll notice that if you have a logical mind, you'll notice that he mentioned 3 logical possibilities. The known known, the known unknown, and the unknown unknown. He left out one. If you actually look at it carefully, he left out the unknown known. There are 4 logical possibilities, right? Which is very indicative, because what's the unknown known? I'm sorry if this is getting too detailed for some of you.
The unconscious.
Huh?
The unconscious.
Yeah, exactly. It's the unknown known are the ways that what he actually knows reflects his own ignorance. That's one way to interpret it. What? Could be the Buddha nature, the unknown known. Well, I was thinking that might be the unknown unknown, to use Donald's vocabulary. But it was very interesting to me, because it's the unknown known, you might say, is reflecting the ways in which what he actually thinks is knowledge actually reflects ignorance, or has the unconscious behind it driving it. Anyway, that's something of this sense of darkness as ignorance. It's really the sense of how do we go into our own ignorance? How do we, and I think this time of year can invite that. You might ask yourself, what would it mean? What are the areas of my ignorance? Or what's one area that I want to explore? And there's also the sense of darkness as difficulty. We talk about dark times sometimes in English, and people were mentioning certain kinds of difficulty or grief, and it's one of the tremendous blessings of our practice is that it's a practice whereby we work increasingly to make what's difficult workable. I know for many of us, for me, this was one of the first great lessons of meditation practice, that I didn't have to relate to what was difficult or painful simply by trying to get rid of it. And it's actually a radical revolution where we can learn, against very much our conditioning, very much against the conditioning, to spend time with what's difficult, to spend time with what's painful. We start, in our practice by working with smaller pains, so we don't, just jump into the most intense pain. But we start working with that, and we find ways that what's difficult or painful becomes workable, becomes something that we can bring into awareness and explore. And this is one of the great glories of this practice, that we enjoy the difficult necessarily, but that we can really work with it in a different way. And I know for me this has been a total revolution, that I could go into very difficult states, that I could work with physical pain, or that I could work with grief, or that I could work with judgments, which have been one of my own main focus of practices, to really work continually with this difficult energy of judgment, which is almost more difficult than anything else sometimes. And to have the mindfulness practice and the various teachings be guides so that we can gradually open up to what's difficult or what's painful. And our society, of course, has a very, very hard time doing that. It's almost as if we try to segregate everything that's difficult or painful, and not look at it. And it's one of the reasons, I think, for the ongoing calamities of our culture, is that we have a very hard time looking at what we might call shadow material, collective shadow material, whether it's the legacy of slavery or homophobia, or just all the varied difficulties of the past, or the Vietnam War, or whatever. We don't want to look at it just in the same way we don't want to look at even what's happening now in Iraq. We don't want to look with, as it were, the eyes of reality at the situation, because it goes against the images we have. And the commitment of our practice is that we do learn to look clearly at what's happening and open up to reality, even if it's difficult. And the lesson that's to be learned from there is that when we can do that, we stop being so reactive, and we can actually respond in a compassionate way. And so perhaps an invitation to practice at this time might be to open to what's difficult in your life and to do so with more commitment or intention or focus. As the Tibetan practice, some of you know, called the Lojong, says, transform all obstacles into the path of practice. What would our lives be like if we could do that more? That's really what the invitation is here. And the last quality of the dark that I want to talk about, maybe my personal favorite, if I can have a personal favorite about the dark, it's the quality of darkness as the unknown or the mysterious. And this, again, I think comes right back to our practice. It's the sense of, can we be in the present moment and simply open to the present moment as it's occurring? Can we right now move out of our concepts or ideas, our planning about the future, our thinking, darkness, schmarkness, what's for lunch next, or whatever might be on our mind. And can we move to being with the present moment? And this is, can we take this time of the darkness as a way to really embrace the unknown? And for me, I love the quality of dark time because it can take me back to this quiet resting in the unknown, the way that this moment right now has never existed before. We have no idea what's going to happen right now. I love sometimes speaking and realizing that I have no control over the words coming through my mouth. I have no idea what's going to come next. Something very strange could happen and I wouldn't know what it was and I don't know what I'm saying. And can we open to that quality of being present in our lives and taking moment after moment as if it's the unknown and the mysterious? There's a beautiful book that some of you know called Freedom from the Known by Krishnamurti. Some of you may have read this. And the book is really about the way that we let go of the more narrow known to open up to the wider unknown. I just wanted to read the end of the first chapter. He's really talking about dropping the habits and the authority. He says, to understand ourselves needs no authority, either of yesterday or 1,000 years, because we are living things, always moving, flowing, never resting. When we look at ourselves with the dead authority of yesterday, we will fail to understand the living movement and the beauty and quality of that movement. To be free of all authority of your own and that of others is to die to everything of yesterday so that your mind is always fresh, always young, innocent, full of vigor and passion. It is only in that state that one can learn and observe. And for that, a great deal of awareness is required. Actual awareness of what is going on inside you without correcting it or telling what it should be or not be. Because the moment you do that, you've established a censor. So it's this quality of opening continually, which is what we work with in our practice. And I think it's also a quality that we can maybe in some ways use in relation to these really difficult political times. That we could have, when we talked about the darkness as difficult, we could have talked about what's coming in our culture. Because, again, this is my view. You may or may not share this, but it seems to me that we're in for a very dark time. And this teaching of going into the darkness may be very relevant from a political point of view. How do we work with the darkness? How do we work with the darkness, the not knowing, and seeing the potentially creative and fertile aspects of this time as well as the difficult and dangerous times? There's shortly after the election, there was a beautiful letter that was sent around from Clarissa Pinkola Estes. Some of you know her writing. And she said, "Do not lose heart. We are made for these times." She was saying that the knowledge and the training that's been accumulating, the knowledge of how to open the heart, the knowledge of how to work with difficulty, is being called forth now. And so this isn't a way to take even the difficulties as the unknown and the mysterious, calling forth something that we don't exactly know what it is. Because ultimately, I think the quality of being with the darkness calls forth a kind of faith. It's a faith to be with what's difficult. It's a faith to be with what's unknown. And it's a faith to be with that in the sense of knowing that the darkness or the unknown or the difficult is often very fertile, is often very creative. I think I just wanted to end with, I wanted to read another poem. This is from Neruda. And this is about the quality in which we can be with the dark in a way that brings forth the new and the mysterious in a very positive way. If each day, this is Neruda, if each day falls inside each night, there exists a well where clarity is imprisoned. We need to sit on the rim of the well of darkness and fish for fallen light with patience. I'll read that again. If each day falls inside each night, there exists a well where clarity is imprisoned. We need to sit on the rim of the well of darkness and fish for fallen light with patience. And so that sense of darkness as the unknown and the mysterious, I think, calls forth a sense of practice as well. I think each of these understandings of darkness can really invite us to, if this resonates with us, to take this time as a time, what are you doing this month? I'm practicing with the darkness. What does that mean? It could mean attending to nature, that first sense of noticing the light, attending to nature, slowing down, attending to our own cycles, looking at what the trees do, having a sense of what this is calling forth, really attending to the cycles. That could be a way of practicing. Or the second sense of being with the darkness as fertile could have us be open to the possibilities that what we call dark could actually be very productive and creative. It's a change in perspectives, and to appreciate this beautiful quality of the dark that we find in dreams, that we find in other manifestations. And the third sense of darkness as ignorance, we could really take as an intention to use this time to explore where there's ignorance and say, okay, how do I move into, see what some of the qualities where I'm a little unclear. It could be our judgment, it could be our fear, it could be my sense of vocation, what I'm yet further called to do in this world. And then that fourth sense of darkness as difficulty, to really commit further to taking difficulties as opportunities for learning, or opportunities for awakening. Not easy at all, but how do we do that? And lastly, the sense of darkness as opening to the unknown or mysterious, which may be the most broad sense in our practice. It's that sense of being centered in the present and not so preoccupied by the past and future. Knowing the past and future where that's important, knowing the past, what's happened, but somehow opening to the present. And we might take this time as a time to recommit to that sense of being with the unknown and the sense of darkness, being with the unknown as it unfolds, and dropping some of our needs to control experience. So I hope that this has interested you further in darkness practice. And I'll stop here, and perhaps we could talk about anything that resonated, or any comments or questions about anything brought up. So thank you very much. Please.
The quote from Neruda at the end actually summarized the essence of what I was getting from your talk, which was that whatever the quality of darkness that you're looking at, there's some sort of inspiration, creativity, knowledge, learning, exploration. And all those words are often characterized by words of light and brightness and growth. And so the symbolism of the spot of light emerging from the black and the spot of black coming from the darkness is just part of the lack of distinction between the two, that there's this continuity.
Yeah.
And the quote from the Buddha, the day falling into night, the clarity lost. Well, the clarity is the start of a new day.
Yeah, and it's we tend sometimes to get fixated on the light, maybe in this culture particularly, and that's related to a lot of stuff. It's related to racism and whiteness and all this stuff. And the light can also, as it were, be the dark. Can be a problem in that sense. I think Buddhist practice helps us to work through fixations about either the light or the dark, and to just appreciate the qualities of either. I think at its best, and one thing I love, I haven't done this, but in Tibetan Buddhism, maybe some of you have done this, there's actually something called a dark retreat, where you, maybe for a week at a time, you sit in total darkness and meditate. Does that sound like fun to anyone? It does to me. I don't. That may be just my mind. But thank you. Please.
I thought it was very interesting, and it struck me what came through to me was about the need, or at least the possibility, of venturing into the unknown, the unconscious, and if one doesn't do that, then one is stuck in the present and the unexplored moment, or mired in the past.
Yeah.
And what occurs to me also is that to do that requires courage, or faith, or if not faith, then hope.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of something that I was teaching in that class yesterday about change. It was in organizations, but so the classic model is that from Berlin, who was a psychologist, is that you go from, it's not a smooth transition is the major point. And so first you have to unfreeze things. It was more a metaphor.
Yeah.
And then you learn, and then you refreeze again until the cycle goes over. And what occurred to me as I've been observing that is between the unfreezing and the change is something I call the void.
Yeah.
In which it's we have to sit with it.
Yeah, and it sometimes takes conscious effort to move into that, and that's really the darkness that's fertile. Really, it takes conscious effort to do that, and sometimes it's just creating space. We have such busy lives. For something new and creative to come, sometimes we need to actually just stop doing things and establish space. I know for myself, there was a time about 5 years ago when I felt I was being too busy with my work, and I felt some new things wanting to come along. At a certain point, I said, I just have to stop everything. And I was able, logistically, to take about a year and work with my job, so I did very little. And I dropped virtually all the structure in my life for a year, which sometimes is kind of scary. And I knew that I had to establish space for something new to come into being. That just being busy all the time, certain things are simply not going to happen, even if they're all good things that one's doing. And so establishing that space, whether it's a space just to have a day or two a week where one's not so busy. Personally, I do a Sabbath one day a week where I just drop the usual activities. And that is, in a way, bowing to darkness as fertile, like you're saying, because it's that where we can kind of unfreeze stuff. But sometimes we have to drop stuff. I had to drop a lot of what I was involved in, and a lot of the people did not like me for it. They complained and they said, I was co-editing a journal, and I just stopped it, and the managing editor said, "This journal will fall apart without you." I didn't quite say it like this, but I said, "Let it fall." But I wasn't so callous. But you get the point that sometimes you just have to know that you have to create space for this unfreezing to happen, so it's a quality of letting go, isn't it? I loved what you were talking about, faith and hope. We could mention other qualities that are important for this being with the darkness: letting go, courage, openness. Yeah. Please.
Something that struck me when you were talking about the unknown, so to speak, and you mentioned that spoke to ignorance, and I thought it spoke more to knowledge, that there are things that we know that we don't know that we know. So.
Say that again.
There are things that we don't realize that we know.
Yeah.
Answers that we have, that we've come upon, that we haven't asked the question to, so we've never known that we had the answer.
Yeah. Yeah, I think actually we could really build a whole morning and afternoon based on looking at the implications and worked out or not worked out from our Secretary of Defense. But yeah, I think that is another way to look at that, isn't it? It's really because I find I was just talking with a friend yesterday who was in a lot of kind of despair. And I could see really clearly from a distance that it's because she didn't know how wonderful she was, and she was caught by self-judgments. She was not in touch with knowing something about herself that other people could see more readily, and I think it's pretty common, isn't it? And there are ways that a lot of spiritual practice is just actually coming to know who we actually are, and really being more and more grounded in it. So we're and the way to do that is to often work with the difficulties. I think she has to really work through those self-judgments, which meditation practice is one major vehicle. Does that get some of what you were saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Please. And then.
Just as a comment, I'm actually in a session at the Zen Center right now. I only here for an important reading that was too important it was important enough to leave for.
Yeah.
And your talk is very much like the Adam's been saying. About being present, what you expect.
Yeah.
I was struck though what I went through other thoughts, and thinking about the eternal light that's celebrated in Hanukkah.
Yeah.
But also what's the lighting of the candles.
Yeah.
And also the star in the sky.
Yeah.
At the time of darkness.
Yeah.
And I want to think about those two.
Yeah.
Light is hopeful. I follow, for some reason, the calendar.
Yeah.
In terms of when the sun rises and the sun sets.
Yeah.
And in 10 days, the sun will start rising earlier.
Yeah.
There's a strangeness about the calendar. It seems like, oh no, it should be the 21st. And I always kind of excited about that. That's the day when it starts to get light.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have any comments about those subjects? The Jewish celebration
at
this time, the Christian celebration of the star.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because it's. I think in many cultures there'd be a celebration also of the darkness. Mm-hmm. And I can't comment so much about the. I'm wondering if there's. This is more of a question, but I'm wondering. I would guess that if some of you may know more than I do, for example, about Jewish mysticism, but my sense is that there's a sense that the light comes out of a more primordial darkness. Is that some of you know this? I think is it the Ein Sof, is it? In Kabbalistic doctrine. And when you like that passage I read from the native culture, from the Northwest culture, there's a sense that darkness is very primeval. I think that's probably more of a sense of, in Buddhist practice, there's certainly light, but there's also this quality of primeval darkness out of which things come, which you find in various traditions. And it may be that we as a culture are out of balance with that. This is my own view. I think we're maybe more fixated on the light, so that because we're more scared of the darkness. And so it may be part of our own balancing or healing to be more appreciative towards the dark. I wonder if you go back into the history of those holidays and the history of those traditions, whether you find actually some changes where there may have been more appreciation of the dark as well as the light. That's more of a speculative question. But it's also, I think, I don't want to only speak for the darkness. I think light is wonderful also. And I think these are celebrations of the light, but I think my own taste would be towards more of a balanced sense of darkness and light. And again, I know in our culture that it's not balanced. That there's a fear of the dark, there's a fear of difficulty, there's, translates into a fear of dark people, and so forth. And it's pretty prevalent. And to me, that indicates an imbalance in how we look at light and dark. Does that make some sense? To some people, yeah. So you were, and then Paul. Yeah.
I was just going to say that this is just in my life, I guess, but I've heard it before too, that kind of an initial awakening can be to the light of consciousness that's in your own, that animates this body mind. And that's all fine and good for a while, because that you begin to elucidate and see these structures. But there arises from that a fear that you are isolated in that. And in Naroda's poem, it is a faith gesture to realize that what has been borrowed into this particular body mind, what has been entrapped here in various ways, by what I would see the darkness as sort of a camouflaging of the connection down that dark well to this great light. And that we're kind of all spun off into our own little worlds. And once you recognize that your own awareness is the light, and that it can't be separate, and it maintains its connection through awareness, through anything that is a refraction of that light, apparent darkness.
Well, what your question and your question made me reflect, and I don't want to get too speculative, because my intention is really to bring this all back to very basic and simple practice, to hope to inspire practicing with the dark. But what these questions make me reflect on is that what our culture may be seeking is a more integrated connection of darkness and light, that when we only try to focus on the light, we get into troubles. And that we may, when we only focus on the light and clarity and so forth, we may champion the mind and neglect the body. The body is dark, right? In that calculus. Or we may be afraid of the unconscious. We want the clarity and so forth. And so I think what's called forth by our times is more of an integrated, balanced sense of bringing in both the light and the dark. Because we would say the dark is the unconscious, the dark is nature, the dark is our people living closer to nature, and so forth. And we can focus on this clarity that gets to a point almost of transcending. And so, again, this is me speaking. This is not Buddha Dharma, but it's my own speculation that what we may be called to do is to really balance the light and the dark in our times, which means obviously balancing with the natural world and balancing mind and body, and so forth. So we don't have a sense of being spiritual as something which just goes for the light and escapes from the earth, and escapes from our bodies. So, yeah, I hadn't thought about those issues in preparing the talk, but I think that's kind of the background. Paul, and then Steve.
I think in the beginning of the St. John's Gospel, there's a really interesting line.
Yeah.
The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not comprehend it.
Yeah.
And I also realized that in terms of the darkness of the outcome of the election that many of us feel, there is I go to the UC gym because they have a really nice membership for former employees there. And there was a young man who came into the gym. He was about a 19-year-old, long hair, Latino. And he had a Bush Cheney t-shirt on. And I was just horrified. I mean, I can only imagine what it felt like in pre-World War II Germany for someone to see a Nazi shirt or something like that. I mean, I was that shocked. And also, because I grew up on the campus in the 70s, when it was extremely liberal, I keep forgetting that it's not an extremely liberal campus in the way it was in the 70s anymore. And I felt a lot of aversion toward that guy. I felt a lot of anger and a lot of hostility. And I thought, what is that all about? It's just a kid coming in the gym to work out. He's got a t-shirt on, reflecting what half the people in the country did. And I realized that we complain about how polarized the right is. And then when I see how polarized I am, I'm seeing a kid wearing a t-shirt, it was really shocking to me to see where I was. And I resolved to try to pay attention to that, to really pay attention to the separation thing, because it's very stupid. I never used to be afraid of Republicans, and now I really have a dread. I have a dread of talking to a Republican, I mean, I hope I don't offend anybody here, but I'm just talking as the issues that I'm dealing with in this dark period. It has made me realize how judgmental I am. And I figure if I'm that judgmental about this, it must carry over to other areas of my life. It must. It can't be just this isolated thing that I'm that reactive to. So, oh gosh, I can't say I welcome the darkness, but I see the opportunity. I'll say that. I do see the opportunity.
Well, it's time. There's a line in the group that David goes to, where I've taught sometimes at Spirit Rock for Sylvia's group. The group brought out this topic, which I've loved, called the Dharma of difficult people, which is sort of a focus on how to make being with difficult people, and difficult people could include people in positions of political power, not just people close to us, as a starting point for practice. And it's a very, very key way to practice. And there's a line that I remember from Shanti Deva from the 8th century, which goes like this: like a treasure appearing unbidden in my house, I should be happy to have an enemy or difficult person, for that person helps me in my conduct of awakening. Not the only perspective to have towards a difficult person, but it's a fundamental one. And it's, for many of us, maybe not all, there was no litmus test to come in here. There may be some people who disagree with you politically here. And I would hope that they would feel okay to be here. And they might find you a difficult person. But it's to take that as a starting point for practice doesn't mean not to act. It doesn't mean not to be responsible to try to change things, but to really take those charges you were finding as a place of practice seems that's one of the great contributions our practice can bring. We could talk about that for the rest of the day, but maybe I'll stop there.
Thank you, Don.
Yeah.
Can we have announcements?
I'm the host this morning, and we'll have some refreshment after the discussion. And we also have water for tea. If you make tea and use cups, please wash the cups you use yourself and put them back. And also we have a dana bowl outside, and we ask each one of you to put in your donation. Suggested amount is $5. If you can put in more, please do so. If you cannot, put in whatever you can, but we do appreciate your putting some donation in a dana bowl. And also, if you are here for the first time or if there's an interview coming, please feel free to talk to the facilitator or the host or anybody else who seems to be around. And finally, there may be some people who are going to lunch together afterwards. And so if you're not sure who are going, let me know. And I'll find out whether some people are going or not.
Yes.
I was wondering how many people are here for the meeting on the facilitating contact with prisoners.
Which is meeting
How many
afterwards.
people are here for that? Oh, it's published in the meeting. Well, most people sign
So
up for
there's
it.
a meeting here at 12:30?
Yes, there's a meeting here. I hope it'll be at 12:15 so we get started. Dealing with the issue of handling correspondence with gay Buddhist prisoners. So I just wondered how many people.
Okay, so it looks like it's 3 or 4.
So you were showing hands right now. Right? So anybody interested? Raise your hand.
I don't know. Okay, we'll talk about it. Let's talk briefly.
Is anyone here for the first time, by the way? Welcome, all you old people.
Next Sunday after the regular sitting is the steering committee meeting. So if anyone has anything they want to bring up, you can come to the meeting, or if you don't want to come to the meeting, you can talk to me or to, who else on the steering committee is here? Lee, two Michaels on here. You can talk to Lee or I, or you could just email on the Yahoo group. Also, this is the, December is the month where we have our fundraising letter go out, and I just want to encourage people to make an extra donation at this time of year. Sometimes people write checks and mail them in, or they put them in the dana bowl. And if you want to do that, please think about doing that. If you'd rather, you could just make an extra nice donation when you leave today or during this month. We just made it this year in terms of money, and without the fundraising effort, we don't make it. Next year. Yeah, don't make it next
Could you give us one figure? How much does it cost to rent this monthly?
We think it's 50 or 60.
It's at least 60. It might be 70.
A week.
A week.
4 or 5.
If you wanted a line item of the budget,
No, I just wanted to give people an idea.
Anybody wants to at this steering committee.
I just wanted to make a brief announcement about Roger Paulus, who was the speaker last week, and who, I guess some of you know, has some concern about his health. He did see his doctor, and they found out that he has tumors in his bladder, so he will have an operation this coming Tuesday. And he just wanted to let people know that he is okay. He now found out what the problems were, and I hope that people will think of Roger when you make daily prayer, and wish for his quick recovery.
And it's if anybody wants to call him, it's the hospital in Vallejo, the Sutter Solano Hospital, Sutter, Solano.
Let's dedicate the merit of our meeting to that tonight.
Just, I brought in just a handout that has schedule of some of my own work and teaching and related to socially engaged Buddhism. And next year I'm going to do a day-long in Spirit Rock on the Dharma and the Clown, if anyone's interested. And more immediately, I'm co-teaching a one-week loving-kindness retreat that starts at the beginning of January, and there is still room in that if anyone. It's a beautiful retreat. Also with Sylvia Borstein. So I'll just leave these here. If you're interested, you can come up and get them, and it has a schedule for the next year.
Clint, you have an announcement?
Very brief. A little snafu with the schedule. G. Singh is shown to be the speaker next week. That was a mistake. Hopefully he'll speak in February. So we may have an open discussion. We may have no speakers.
We may have another speaker. You're looking for someone for next week?
There might be open discussion.
Yes.
Just two brief ones. If anyone would like to host a potluck, please talk to me. We had a Thanksgiving dinner, but for the next few months, if you feel like you'd love to do that. The other thing is, if anyone wants to, in the next few months, we're going to be doing a concentration on meditation technique. I'm not saying this very well. If anyone would like to talk to the program committee people about giving the talk on your own practice and your own meditation style, please talk to Jim or it's on the 19th. Just be for about 3 months.
Again?
I must admit I guess the question I'm disappointed that none of the people who signed up and said they would be at this meeting came, except people who are always present all the time. So there are no volunteers to help do this work because people here do everything else. So I'm disappointed. I don't know the significance of that.
Are you?
This is a follow-up on that.
Yes, that's what I thought.
So I won't take much time. But just to follow up on it, and I'm not available to do it now because I've got a lot of other commitments, but I've done this a couple of times with prisoners over an extended period and found it both pleasant and rewarding. And if you can find the word process is not a lot of work.
Okay, the announcement time does become a time when businesses transact, but it seems because there's no other opportunities sometimes. Donald, do you want to lead us in the offering of merit?
Sure.
So we stand in the circle.
So may we offer the fruits of our time together, the learning, the insights, whatever intentions may have come out of this morning in relation to practicing with the dark. We offer our learning, our insights, our time together, both for our own learning, our own awakening, but also very much for the awakening of others. We practice not just for ourselves, but for others. And so we offer these fruits for the healing, for the transformation, and for the awakening of all beings. May it be so. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.